Welcome to the Joint Legislative Oversight and Sunset Committee. My name is Senator Kyle Evans Gay. I represent the 5th Senate District here in North Wilmington, and I'm chair of the committee this year. I'd like to start, as we always do, with introductions by our committee members, starting with our Vice Chair, Representative Sherry Dorsey Walker.
Good morning, and thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Sherry Dorsey Walker. I represent the 3rd District, which is the west side of Wilmington.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Hansen.
Senator Stephanie Hansen, the 10th District, that's part of Middletown, Bear, Glasgow, and a little bit of Newark.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Richardson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Bryant Richardson to represent the 21st Senatorial District, Seaford to Delmore.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Spiegelman.
Representative Jeff Spiegelman, representing Clayton, north to Middletown, and Clayton, south to Merida, both.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Pettyjohn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Brian Pettyjohn, 19th District, Georgetown, Bridgeville, and Long Neck.
Thank you. Representative Griffith.
Good morning. I'm Krista Griffith, representing the 12th District, representing neighborhoods in North Wilmington, Greenville, and Hokeston. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. Kendra Johnson, representing the 5th District here in Newcastle County, communities in Newark, Newcastle, as well as Bear. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Pinckney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Senator Marie Pinckney, representing the amazing 13th District, covering parts of Newark, Newcastle, and Bear.
Thank you, Senator. And Representative Urich.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Lyndon Urich. I serve as the state representative in the 34th District, which covers Camden, Wyoming, Woodside, and Magnolia. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I'd now ask our staff to introduce themselves, starting with the analyst who's going to have the most work today, at least, Amanda.
Good morning, everyone. I am Amanda McAtee. I am one of the analysts for the committee.
And I am Mark Brainerd. I am the other analyst for the committee.
Good morning. I'm Holly Vaughn Wagner. I'm the committee's legislative attorney.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Elliot Gray, and I am the committee's legislative fellow.
Do we have Natalie this morning? Potentially not. And also Natalie White. Thank you so much to our staff. And just to catch the members of the public up on our conversations before we went live, we were just gushing about how great our staff has been to keep us going in this virtual environment. So thank you very much. We don't say it enough. And so now, as I heard Senator Lopez do yesterday, it's on the record. I'd like to start with a review of our minutes from our last meeting, which was just this week, March 23rd, 2021. No one can say that Sunset's not working hard for the people. If you could take a look at these minutes, and if there are no questions or comments, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, who's second? Oh, Senator Pettyjohn.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Yep. All those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes, please signify by your silence. Anyone opposed, please unmute and say nay. Hearing no opposition, the motion passes. Thank you very much. We're going to move into our first agenda item. And as I stated, prior to going live, anyone who is here for the Health Resources Board recommendations, those will be the second agenda item. First, we're going to turn to the discussion and selection of 2022 entities for Sunset Review. So I'm going to actually ask Mark to give the committee a quick update, and you also, all the committee members, received this list this week in your email. This is a slate based on some of the feedback that the committee members gave in our prior meeting, and as well following the prior meeting. And I'll let Mark take you through the work that the analyst did with those suggestions.
Sure. Thank you, Senator. This list is based on the short list that committee members had mentioned at the last meeting that this was discussed, I believe on the 11th of March, as well as emails we received back in the interim. So each of these entities appeared on at least 3 shortlists. There are 7 of them that we put together and created just a couple bullet points, very briefly, explaining what each entity does. At the bottom, we broke out 2 of them that appeared on 4 of the shortlists that would need a more focused research project first. We're not quite sure in our very brief initial research if these 2 entities are currently functioning. So we would first need to establish that through some work first to indicate to the committee if these are appropriate for full reviews or if it's something a little less time consuming. So that was very brief. So Amanda and I can take any questions that members of the committee may have.
I'm happy to entertain any questions from the committee. Another just piece of information that may be helpful to the committee is that this is by no means the decision of the committee. This is a slate that was brought together with the hopes of creating some, with kind of fast tracking some of the discussion to try and understand where folks were. So we can talk about the entities we see on here. We can talk about entities we don't see on here. We can adopt this slate in total or in part. And so I'm happy to start the conversation with Representative Spiegelman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mark, could you scroll back down? I'm sorry, to the bottom, those 2 organizations that need more focus. Are you saying that you are weary of having these 2 be considered on the short list because we need to do more research, so perhaps it would be more appropriate to have them be potentially under review in the next cycle? Or are you saying that despite the need to figure out more about these, they are eligible for review? Because it sounds like one of the things you said is that we don't even know if they're meeting. And to me, that's one of those, like, having been on this committee for a while, that's one of those red flags that goes up and says, well, maybe that's why they should be reviewed. So I wanted to see if that was your intent or what we're doing with 2 of these. Just looking at the numbers that appeared on short lists, 4 would put them pretty high up on our list.
Right. And I think our thought with this was, the first step in this process is sending a questionnaire to the highest administrative officer. We don't even know who that is for these 2 groups. So we don't even know if we can get any sort of questionnaire back from these entities at all. So that's kind of what we were thinking in doing that more focused research at first to indicate to the committee where these entities exist, and if they do, if not, if we come back to you and say these entities haven't met, there's no function to them, the next step of the conversation is, well, does the committee want to remove them? Does the committee want to sunset them? So it wouldn't be a review in the traditional sense of questionnaire, report, presentation, recommendation. It would be, well, these groups aren't meeting and they're not functioning. So what's the next step? Is it to sunset them, or is it to kind of restructure their mechanism to get them functioning?
Okay. So in other words, we could, in theory, adopt this whole page. In other words, you and Amanda have the capacity to do all 7 of these that appeared on multiple shortlists, in addition to these other 2 outliers, is what I'm getting from you. Because my initial thought was, and what you said was, we could adopt these 7, but maybe we should consider not doing these 2 until we do more research.
No, we can adopt this whole page, and we have the bandwidth, the staffing bandwidth to do reviews and research on all 9.
Thank you. That's clear. I was looking for. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Richardson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe the gentleman's name with the motion picture group is Mr. Healy. I can find out more information about what's taking place with that, if that would be helpful.
Absolutely, Senator. We were struggling in our brief research into all of these entities. We couldn't find a lot of information. So any info you have would help us out tremendously. Thank you.
I should be able to find that out today, and I'll get you the information. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. That's incredibly helpful. Senator Hansen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to mention and ask for some assistance from Mark and Holly or whomever. I'm actually on the Family Law Commission. So would it be a conflict of some sort for me to be on the commission, but yet also on the, the group that's evaluating the commission and making, recommendations? I just want to get a little clarity on that.
Holly, do you have a, oh, I'm sorry,
Sure.
Mark.
No, if I don't want to step on Holly's toes, we talked about it this morning. So if she can give the answer she gave me, which would be incredibly helpful.
Thank you, Holly, please do.
Sure. We've had this come up before with a member on Sunset when we were doing another review a few years ago. And so I have done this research. Because you're serving on that commission in your capacity as a legislator, not to represent your own personal or business interests, there's not a conflict.
Thank you, Holly. Did you have any follow-up questions, Senator Hansen?
No, that's it.
You're going to still have to hang out with us, Senator Hansen, if we do the Family Law Commission. I know, right? Representative Johnson, I believe you were next.
Yes, good morning. I'd like to make a motion that all individuals who are part of the Family Law Commission not have to participate. Would include myself as well. I
think
that's right.
Both of us take that up with the chair. How about that?
Okay.
I assume it's a joking motion, but I don't want to ignore your motion if it is serious.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was.
That's okay. Thank you.
Holly, thank you for the clarity, and Senator Hansen, thank you for asking the question.
We'll have a lot of inside information if we do end up reviewing that commission. So thank you both, and thanks for your service. Senator Hansen, I noticed you still had your hand up. I just want to make sure that we had addressed your questions.
No, I just need to lower my hand.
Okay, thank you. Representative Urich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if we could ever do it. One thing that I look at is a financial impact or the impact to Delawareans in regard to the agencies or committees or commissions that we're reviewing. They may not have a hard cost associated with them, or maybe they do. Maybe they have an executive director or whatnot. For example, the motion picture one, as Senator Richardson mentioned, Mr. Healy, TJ, to me, I'm less concerned about them because of the financial implication of what they have or what they don't have. But others, like the Water Commission and the Family, I think there's more of a depth and reach, the library piece, that again, if it's ever an opportunity to somehow have a direct or / indirect financial budgetary association with agencies, commissions that we review, that I would find it helpful. Maybe others would, maybe others wouldn't. But I'd add that, and I like the top 7. And when we get to it, I feel comfortable making that motion, though, to be the 7 that we review moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative. And I agree. I think there are so many aspects of these, including length of time, past reviews, and then the financial impact. And I think they all need to be looked at. So, as we continue to move forward in developing the newer processes, I think definitely trying to understand as much research as can be done ahead of time, what kind of an estimate of the financial impact. So thank you for that. And I think, Amanda, you wanted to comment as well.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add that the bottom of the list, Mark, if you scroll down, the last 2, the motion picture and the adult literacy, the council, those 2 that's going to be a more focused review. So that's, if you think back to the orientation when we were talking about doing like a component review or a focused review, currently it's in the statute as a rules review. That's where we want to try this out. So that was why these two are on here, is it would give us an opportunity to do that focused review, and for the reasons that Mark Brainerd mentioned a minute ago.
Thank you for the clarification. Senator Richardson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know I've seen this at one time. How many entities are there? I think it's more than 400 entities that can be reviewed. Can I get a list of those? Maybe I should have already had the list, but can you send me somebody email me a list of those entities so I can review them?
Amanda?
Yeah, we have a spreadsheet from the governor's office. We also sent out in the orientation packet. The end of that packet is all of the entities that are available for review. I was going through those and making some edits to that. Some of them have become defunct or removed from code, but for the majority, that list is current. But Mark and I, as we mentioned a couple meetings ago, this list was taken from all those materials. We're looking to review entities that haven't been reviewed before, and just, you know, we have to have something for review for 2022, and this list would have great impact, you know, based on our preliminary research from the from the larger list that we originally presented.
And Amanda, do you think you can just send that again to Senator Richardson so it's top of mind for him?
Oh, sure, absolutely, yes.
I was wondering too, Madam Chair, if I may.
Absolutely.
Is there any way to prioritize that list according to how much it costs the taxpayers of Delaware, going from the most expensive to the least expensive? Maybe, I'm sure the ones at the bottom of the list don't cost the taxpayers a penny, but the ones at the top of the list probably are the ones that cost the most to the taxpayers, so that we can evaluate the effectiveness of that as far as an investment for the taxpayers. Is that a possibility or not?
Senator Richardson, if I may suggest, and I'm going to let the analysts answer because they know their workload, but I'm wondering, because I do think that several members of the committee have brought up an understanding how financial impact affects our decisions, potentially with a list as large as many as 400, potentially that's a project that we could discuss for, I'll call it the off season, you know, as we are in the midst of these reviews. And I'm just curious, Senator Richardson, were you thinking about, you know, doing that ahead of voting on 2022 reviews, yeah, or were you considering a long-term project as I suggested?
I consider it a long-term project, and I'm sure that the analysts can identify the ones that are the most expensive right now as far as cost to taxpayers, and maybe they could just supply a partial list, not the whole 400 and some entities, but the ones that would cost the taxpayers the most.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Amanda, did you want to comment?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to comment that the part of the review, it's a performance review, which is a standard sunset and oversight review. And part of that review is uncovering the fiscal impact. And we have the ability to work closely with the CG's office. But the intent of the committee by statute is not to review based on fiscal impact. The intent is to eventually review every entity. Excuse me, I think my phone is cutting out. But the intent is to eventually review every board and commission in the state. So of course, when we create lists for potential reviews, we're looking at where it's going to make an impact, but the intent is to eventually review everything. So while I appreciate the focus, you're not the only one that has mentioned the fiscal impact, but it is part of the review, and the intent of this committee is to review all of the boards and commissions and look at their performance, and the fiscal part is a component of that, but it's not the focus.
Okay, well, just doing some quick math, it would take more than 50 years to review all of them, even if we did 10 a year. So, I mean, 8 a year, I think it is, whatever we're currently doing. So that's why I just think it would be good to prioritize them as far as the cost to taxpayers too, because I think this is a consideration also that we should be sensitive to. Yeah, of course we want to review them all, but if some of the boards aren't really even functioning that well, and some of them aren't costing the taxpayers any money, I don't see why they should be high on the list of priorities, especially when it's going to take 50 years to half a century to review all the entities at the current level that we're doing.
And Senator Richardson, I agree with you, and I personally believe that in Delaware, our legislative oversight could be more robust, and that we could do more in order to meet our mission, which is to do those full reviews. I also believe that each member of this committee needs to have the information that they need to make what they feel is a valued decision as far as the entities under review. And so I want to definitely commit to you and the rest of the committee that I will work with the staff as well to make sure that each of you has the information that is helpful to you in making those decisions going forward. And that is one of the factors to the extent it's one of the factors to be weighed, we'll make sure and try at least to provide that information. But if you agree, I think that is a great setup for the 2022 process as a way for us in 2022 to think about what our next list for review will be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the comments. Amanda, did you have anything else to add?
Yes, thank you. I just had one more thing to add is, in my opinion, even if on the surface it doesn't look like something has a fiscal impact, most of these entities are appointed by the governor's office. So while it might not appear that they have a fiscal impact, they do have an impact on, what do you call it? Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Not a morning person, sorry, but they have impact on, workload. So that someone has to appoint members to these boards and commissions. So if they're defunct or they're not functioning, then that is one of the things this committee is set out to do, is to clean it up. And that's why we have the ongoing project with the governor's office to work to also streamline this. So that's also why, while it's set up to intend to review every board and commission, it might not exactly happen like that, because like the last two we have on this list, they don't need full reviews right now because we're reviewing to see if they're even functioning. And if, like Mark said, if they're not functioning, then the committee can look at sunsetting them. So that's one of the tools that we have. We've also put a lot of great deal of work in streamlining the whole process. So after this list, so the next year, Mark and I, with our limited staff, could probably review more entities. Also, this committee was created in 1980, so that's part of that statute, as the intent was to review everything. So just that little background information.
Senator Richardson, I want to make sure all your questions were addressed.
Yes, they're addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And I would just note for the committee members that, after having this experience, of our 2021 process, as you're out in your communities, talking to constituents, understanding from your colleagues, even in the House and Senate, where they're sitting on boards and gathering information from them, knowing that we have now a few more tools in our toolbox as far as streamlining the reviews and doing pointed reviews, it could really transform the way that we shape our 2023 list. Senator Richardson. Oh, are you still, we can raise your hand, sir. Sorry. I thought it was raised again. And Mark, did you have one more comment?
I'm so sorry. I did want to mention and clarify that all of these entities, all 9 on this slate, have never been reviewed before. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that prior to anything happening, just to fit the theme that we were sticking with. All 9 of these have never been reviewed.
And so for number 6, the Family Law Commission, when it says revised in 2018, that was not by this committee, but what, a self-revision or legislative?
Right,
revision?
that was a statutory legislative revision.
Okay, great. I don't see any hands raised, so I would, Senator Richardson.
I'm sorry. Thank you,
You're
Madam Chair.
fine.
Maybe we could just look at the top 3 entities, the top 3 that actually cost the taxpayers some money. Just give me that information. I don't need a whole 430 some or whatever that figure is, 50 some listed in any kind of quantity put next to the entity. But maybe just the top 3. I don't know if that's something that you know off the top of your head, or if that's something that you have to do a little bit of research for, but try to make the task a little bit easier. But I'm just curious to see what they might be.
I saw Amanda and Mark both raise your hands, so I'll leave it up to you folks who wants to address it.
I just wanted to say that this list that Mark has up here on the screen, Mark and I would be perfectly fine if the committee just wanted to adopt the entire list. Like, Mark and I have the capacity to review all of these. And in that review, the fiscal impact will be part of the review. It always is. So you would be able to tell a whole lot more from us actually doing the review work and working with the entities through that process. So, I mean, if the committee is fine with adopting this list, we would be thrilled, because the whole purpose of putting this list in front of the committee this early was to make this process more proactive, not reactive. And secondly, Mark and I would really like to start contacting these entities and get the process rolling, because in the past, we have started this process because the committee has selected entities towards the end of session in June, and that puts us several months behind in the process. So in the new streamlined process, we would really love it if the committee could commit and, you know, approve a list such as this. Today would be great. Another day, that's fine, but it's March, and that was our goal that we put forth in the January orientation meeting, because if we have a list of entities that we can move forward with, we can go ahead and start contacting them and start the ball rolling on these reviews and have all this information ready for you when you come back in January.
Senator, to your point as well, what we can try to do right off the bat, if this slate is approved, is start to put that fiscal piece together. What's kind of up in the air and what we don't know now until we start doing this research is, you know, what percentage of staff time is committed to these entities. That's something that plays into the fiscal impact that we wouldn't know until we reach out and start gathering this information from these departments and from these agencies. So that your question is absolutely one I have. It's just something that is very detailed and not very surface level. It takes some work to figure out.
Senator Richardson.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, I don't want to slow down the process that's going on now, or, you know, what you have on the list to review now. I'm just thinking about the future.
Thank you so much,
Just want to
Senator
make sure that our efforts are placed where they have the most impact for taxpayers.
Thank you so much, Senator. And Representative Spiegelman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe Representative Urich was interested at some point here this morning of making a motion to adopt this full page. When we get to that point, hopefully sometime very, very soon, I'd like to second that motion in order to move this process along. Thank you.
Thanks, Representative Spiegelman. You did delay it a bit because I was just about to go to Representative Urich, but Representative Urich, would you like to make your motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In full disclosure, my recommendation would have been the top 7. However, I'm comfortable with each and every one. If it's of your discretion to ask the committee members, we go 7 or 9. My initial
Go ahead.
I'd rather go and dig a little bit deeper in just a fewer, those top 7. And again, all due respect to the 8th and 9th, I just don't see them as having they're significant to those people, don't get me wrong. But when we're looking at the top 7, what their impact is, their breadth, their depth, their importance for Delawareans, financial impact, health, safety, I just think the top 7, I'd like to dig a little bit deeper. So as I backtrack, I'm comfortable with all 9. My favorite flavor is the top 7, however.
So Representative Urich, I want to make sure, I want you to make a motion that you feel comfortable with. I just wanted to clarify that the staff can handle has stated they can handle 8 and 9 as a pointed review. And in my opinion, after seeing the orientation and talking to them about this process, I feel that having 8 and 9 on there would be helpful for us as a committee to see how that pointed review kind of works in theory or in practice, and make sure that as we move forward to next year's, we actually have that pointed review in a way we want it to operate. So if you would feel comfortable with the whole list, I would as well. And I'm happy to also move to someone else if they'd rather make a motion.
No, I'm comfortable with, I'd make that motion because I know Amanda's getting on us right now. I can read between the lines that we better act soon. No.
And we started this meeting.
We serve at their discretion and we want to make sure we're serving them well.
That's right. Thank you so much for your motion. Is there a second to Representative Urich's motion to approve the slate as presented by the staff this morning?
Second.
Thank you, Representative Spiegelman. All those in favor, please signify by your silence. All those opposed, please unmute and say nay. Are there any abstentions? Hearing no opposition, the motion passes, and really grateful. Thank you to the committee and to the staff for making that process really as painless as possible, no matter what Representative Spiegelman got it. All right, we're moving on to our next agenda item. It's the Health Resources Board recommendations. As you will remember, we have previously discussed the Health Resources Board, and we asked our staff to go back and look at them again based on our input. So I'm going to turn it over to them. I also want to note that we've got staff from DHSS and HRB here in case members of the committee have any questions. And for any members of the public watching, please know that although there's no public comment today, you can always submit public comment to the email sunset@delaware.gov. And I do want to turn it over to you, Amanda. I just would like to welcome our DHSS and HRB guests to introduce themselves before we get started, so we can move quickly through the conversation process. I believe we have Mr. Constantino on, Ms. Massa. Did you want to introduce yourselves? You're on mute, Mr. Constantino.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Stephen Constantino, I'm Director of Healthcare Reform for the Secretary of DHSS. Thank you for having me.
Hi, good morning. Elizabeth Massa, the Executive Director of the Delaware Healthcare Commission. Nice to be here.
Thank you. All right, Amanda, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good morning again. Hello, everyone. This is, of course, as Senator Gay mentioned, a continued discussion on the recommendations that were included in the staff findings and recommendations report last week. That report is on the website. Just a reminder for the public that recommendations here are not final until discussed and adopted by the committee. The committee is free to discuss, adopt, or rewrite any recommendations. Any public comment, as Senator Gay mentioned, should be emailed to sunset@delaware.gov. All committee documents, including this presentation, can be found online on the committee section of the General Assembly's website, and this presentation will be posted here later today. On the next slide, I have included the common acronyms once again. I'm not going to go through them, but I just am including this here for the benefit of any newly joining members of the public. I did just make an adjustment at the end, the bottom, to clarify that the CPR, the Certificate of Public Review process, it is Delaware's form of a CON, or Certificate of Need Law, and that, of course, the functions include providing a review of certain proposed new health facilities, services, and major capital expenditures. So just wanted to make sure that there was clarity on that before moving on. The next slide, to quickly recap from the last week's meeting. Staff presented 5 recommendations: to continue HRB with a restructure to advisory capacity, applying statutory revisions, creating a utilization survey, and finally to release from review pending the statute modifications listed under recommendation 2 and 3. Now, based on conversations from the last meeting, I've put together a couple slides to put a visual as to what some of these recommendations could look like. So the first slide here is a change to advisory capacity. With staffing in mind, reviews could be completed on a cycle, and I mentioned that last week, but here's specifically what I mean. Here's some quick examples from around the country. Iowa up here on the top left, they hold 4 meetings per year with application deadlines. Maryland has 2 schedules for each type of application group. They hold 1 meeting for each region in their state. Indiana can take up an entire year to review applications, and they have a deadline to submit each year by July 31st. Illinois in the bottom left, they have 60 and 120-day deadlines, and they hold 9 meetings a year. And then Florida, lastly on the bottom right, they use batching cycles similar to Maryland. Each application group has 2 cycles per year. So this is just an example of how you can do reviews on a schedule. The next slide here is a reminder. This is how the current CPR
I'm sorry, Holly.
process.
Holly, I'm sorry, Amanda, very quickly. Can very quick question. How many times a year does the board currently meet in its current configuration?
This board, well, it varies because it varies on if they have quorum or if they have business. So they have I think it's their bylaws that they have to at least meet quarterly, and I might be incorrectly quoting that, but let me pull up real quick.
No, that's all I need. I couldn't recall if it was a monthly thing. Quarterly helps answer the question. Thank you.
Yeah, it's dependent on whether or not they have business. Like, so for 2019, they met all but 5 times. And in 2020, they met every month except for February, May, and July, if that helps. Okay, thanks. All right, so Mark, the next slide is an example of how this process could look like with a move to an advisory board and with staff completing the review and research of applications and result being the director of the agency making the final determination. Now, this is only an example based on what we pulled from state observations. It's not been discussed with anyone, and I'm just providing it as one example of what this could look like. As you saw a couple slides back, there's numerous ways that even a schedule could be set up. So there's a ton of different ways that this could be implemented. The one option I've highlighted here at the top in the kind of the first couple steps is what some states use for the notice of intent process. This would require the applicant to publish their own public notices in the newspaper. This takes the responsibility and cost off of the state. So in publishing the notices of intent, the applicant then has 30 days, no more than 90 days to submit their completed application. The staff would then use still the 15 business days to review for completeness. And once that was deemed complete, the staff would move on to the review and research portion. That could take 60 days with an option to take a maximum of 120 for complex applications. And then staff would then send the findings report to the applicant and the review committee and post it on the website for the public. Now, within 30 days of the staff completing that report, the advisory committee would hold a hearing. The staff would present the review and findings for the public briefly. Public, including the applicant, could comment, and then the committee, towards the end of it, would make their advisory decision. Then after that, within 30 days, the agency director would make the final decision letter using the staff research, public comment, advisory committee decision, and this letter would accompany the staff's final report, and then that letter would be sent to the applicant and posted to the website. There is currently an appeal process for HRB. It's important to mention that, and that would remain intact with whatever model was, chosen if it moved to advisory. The appeal process would remain. The entire process here that I proposed just as an example, It would take no more than 180 days, which is 6 months to complete. It could take less time at 124 months for less complex applications. It could easily be done on 2 review cycles per year. And this puts forth the research and that the applications really should have done by the staff in review. So the next slide here covers the activity subject to review, which is the topic under recommendation 3 for statute changes. At the top is what the current section reads. And I don't know if everyone remembers last week's discussion, there was a lot of focus on this topic. So I just wanted to show some staff revision ideas. Again, these have not been discussed. They're based on state observations and trends. If the committee adopts recommendation 3, it does not mean that these ideas as written here will end up in a draft bill. This is just an example. And also the committee can make specific recommendations as they wish. The first bullet here under staff revision ideas is a topic pointed out in the staff findings and recommendation report. There is a part of the HRMP and part section B right now that states that in 2009, HRB put a moratorium on the new construction of acute care hospitals. I pointed out last week that if that is going to stay, that really should be codified and put into code. The second bullet here is the capital expenditures. Right now it's 5.8 million. That really could be increased up to at least 30 million. I put some state examples over here into the side. You have Virginia at 20 million, Maryland, our neighbor, is 50 million. This is, based on national trends. So that's how I arrived at 30 million. Of course, when it gets put into practice and draft bills get written, it might not be 30, but that's just an idea. And lastly, the subjects for review could be decreased to just long-term care beds, to change by more than 10 beds, new long-term care facilities, and the for-profit acquisitions of nonprofit healthcare facilities. That actually came from the 2012 review that has never been put into code. So, this board is already set up to do they do the utilization studies with nursing home facilities. So they're actually more equipped to look at long-term facilities as compared to what they look at right now, which is a large range of healthcare facilities. This is in line with national trends. States that have recently cut back on CON activities typically just look at long-term beds. And there are some states that's all they review. So this brings us to the slide back to the recommendations. And I just want to note that based on how, if recommendation 2 and 3 were adopted, they can play out in different ways when the draft legislation gets written. So I am also suggesting that the committee may want to hold off on recommendation 4 and consider tabling it. Just because the amount of review activity, if the amount of review activity sharply decrease, like I just mentioned, that is a possibility, then it wouldn't be worth the board staff completing these studies right now. The aim of recommendation 4 was to provide better support for researching the applications. As I mentioned, HRB already completes studies on nursing home utilization, and most recently they completed a study on assisted living utilization. If the review activities focused on that topic alone, then they wouldn't need the other reports. It is also possible that another department within the state would be better suited to complete such a study. And the study does have value for the state in terms of what utilization looks like. It fits into the scope of overall health efforts and healthcare reform, but there are some state and non-state partners that already complete similar work. So whatever the committee decides, the release from review mechanism in number 5, that allows the committee to revisit recommendation 4 before the enactment of legislation and recommendation 2 and 3 is proposed. So there is that mechanism there. Just as a quick reminder, it's an affirmative vote of 7 members to adopt a recommendation, terminate an entity, or rescind a vote to terminate an entity. And thank you so much again for listening to me and my slides. I'm happy to answer any questions. When Senator Gay mentioned we have DHSS and HRB here as well. And if anyone wants to reference charts from last week's presentation, I do have them here that Mark can easily pull up. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And Mark, if you wouldn't mind leaving that up so that I'm sure folks are viewing it from the public as well as we discuss. I would open it to the members of the committee for any questions regarding the presentation or any follow-up questions you had from our last discussion. Representative Urich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll get it started. Thank you, ma'am. Very beneficial in regard to some of the statute revisions. For example, I think the cost of building a facility may have increased since 2009, and having new thresholds would be, I think, a welcome addition to the existing code. As we have continued debate about the topics, recommendation 1, I think we'll have perhaps some significant dialogue that, if we wish to dive into that right now, I'll take the liberty to. As I mentioned from last week, I think it was last week, any sort of opportunity to increase capacity of a vital service, especially as the last 12 months have presented. Could you imagine if the review board would have declined certain acute care facilities and the addition and expansions of beds maybe 3 years, 5 years ago that would have negatively impacted the potentially to serve individuals at the peak of the pandemic? And pandemics do come back around. I'm in favor of more competition, more access. Our state and our country is getting older. We're going to need additional long-term care facilities, additional acute care facilities. The gloves are off, and I mean boxing gloves, figuratively speaking, in regard to healthcare. 10 years ago, an acute care facility probably had predetermined guidelines and lines in the sand they wouldn't cross. That this was my territory to serve individuals, and this is your territory. Those gloves are off. All you have to do is drive into Sussex County and Kent County and see the expansion of the 2 primary facilities there, and they're more aggressively pursuing customers than ever before. As we get into recommendation 1, I will make that recommendation, if not now, but at the proper time, to recommend terminating the board. Again, I'm for increasing access, increasing competition, ideally lowering cost. I'm not familiar with any scenario where if you increase access, increase competition, increase a product or service, and the demand stays the same, maybe increase, that the cost goes up. If I'm wrong plenty of times, but if somebody has an example to share with me like that, I'd welcome that. But thank you for your work. I look forward to hearing my colleagues' opinions on these items, and thank you again.
Apologies. Thank you, Representative. Representative Dorsey Walker, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I kind of echo the comments of Representative Urich. I have not received very many positive comments about this particular entity, and I would like to give them the opportunity to kind of talk, if you agree to it, Madam Chair, the opportunity to talk about what exactly they do, because maybe there's a misconception with the larger, broader community.
Thank you, Representative Dorsey Walker. And were you saying a member of the HRB, or were you speaking about the staff? Okay, member of the HRB. I will give the staff an opportunity to comment, of course, on any questions or concerns, but if there is a member of HRB on, can you raise your hand? I'm not sure we have a representative this morning, Representative Dorsey Walker, but we may hear from DHSS. Oh, there we go. Ms. Massa and Mr. Fallon have raised their hands. And I'll let Representative Dorsey Walker, do you want to address your question to Ms. Massa or Mr. Fallon, who have raised their hands to for dialogue?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. The question that I have is, what exactly is the role of HRB? Because I think that there's a misconception, there could potentially be a misconception based off what I have read and my understanding. I'm not sure of the reason for the existence of this particular board. So would you take a moment to educate me on that, please, myself and the rest of my colleagues? Thank you in advance.
Ms. Massa, I'm sorry, you can
Hi.
go forward. I didn't mean to hold you up.
Oh, sure. No problem. Elizabeth Massa, the Executive Director of the Healthcare Commission. I actually would let Brett Fallon speak first. I think he raised his hand. He's actually the HRB chair, and he is on the line. If Brett wanted to go first.
Mr. Fallon, welcome. It's wonderful to see you again. And please feel free to respond to Representative's question.
Sure, I'll do my best. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sure. Well, thank you, Madam Chairman, for the opportunity to speak, and representatives and senators. I appreciate your time, and thank you to staff for all staff's good work. I think to respond, obviously the issue of the existence of HRB is a legislative issue, and that's up to you. I guess what I would say is that I think we look at other things other than profitability. I think in a free market system, basically an entity sees an opportunity to put up a new medical facility. And basically what they are looking at is it profitable for the entity, and is it consistent with our purposes? And those are really the only things that entity is going to be looking at. The HRB looks at a number of other factors. They look at the relationship of the proposal to the Health Resources Management Plan. They look at the need of the population for the proposed project. They look at the availability of less costly alternatives if they're out there. The relationship of the proposal to the existing healthcare delivery system, the immediate and long-term viability of the proposal in terms of the applicant's access to financial management and other resources, the anticipated effect of the proposal on the costs and charges for healthcare, and the anticipated effect of the proposal on the quality of healthcare. So we look at a number of other factors that perhaps wouldn't be looked at in a so-called free market system.
Did you have a follow-up, Representative?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that thorough explanation, Mr. Fallon. Were you actively involved, or was the HRB actively involved with the creation of the Veterans Hospital in Milford, based on your answer that you previously gave?
I don't recall that coming up while I've been chair. I don't know before I was chair. I was appointed in 2017. I don't know.
If I may, I think Senator Pettyjohn may have information about this topic. Senator Pettyjohn?
Yeah, Representative, it's not a veterans hospital, it's a veterans home there. So that's something the HRB wouldn't even touch.
Thank you. Thank you for that correction, Senator Pettyjohn. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Senator Pettyjohn. And I know you're still in line. Representative Dorsey Walker, were there any other follow-ups for Mr. Fallon?
No, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Fallon.
Thank you so much. Ms. Massa, did you have any comments before I move on?
No, I would just add, great summary by Mr. Fallon, that, the HRB process also is an opportunity for that public component, the public scrutiny of an application. And, I think at all of this, it's always looking at cost and access and quality. So I just wanted to add those three things. Thanks.
Thank you. And one thing, I will say too is I'm sensitive to the comments and the the many pieces of outreach, I'll say, that we've received from constituents up and down the state on the idea of the free market affecting our healthcare system. I just think we need to understand that people are not widgets, and we often need to understand that we need to serve them where they are, and we need to have services that can reach them. And so what I have come to learn and understand is how the Health Resources Board looks at the types of care and making sure that we aren't just bringing in care that is going to be profitable from a medical standpoint, but also care for the community. And as our state currently faces our primary care physician shortage, we know how important bringing those resources in can be. I'm curious, Mr. Fallon or Ms. Massa, what your thoughts are or what your experience has been working with this board in order to ensure that we are meeting needs as much as kind of determining who can come in.
Well, I'll take a first crack at that, and then Elizabeth can follow on. I will say the HRB is I guess I'll say a passive organization. I mean, we don't go out and try to figure out what medical needs are in a community and then recruit anybody to do that sort of thing. We simply receive the applications and analyze the applications as they come in. And when they do come in, we try to give it our best judgment as you indicated, Madam Chairman, and try to ensure that the community needs are met and that the project is consistent with the community needs. But we don't recruit or encourage or discourage in any way. It really is a passive judicial type of function.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to let Senator Pettyjohn, who's been waiting patiently, jump into the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that. As I said last meeting, whenever that was, time is just weird.
Might have been yesterday, Senator.
It might have been yesterday. It might have been a month ago. I'm not sure when it was now. I do have some really serious concerns about the board. But at the same time, I recognize that currently in Delaware, we have our major healthcare systems are all nonprofits. They're not going to go into an area where they are not going to be able to serve people. And the two examples that I keep coming to are the ones that were in my backyard. The decision to deny both the BB and the Bay Health. Well, the BB, I think Bay Health ended up withdrawing their application, but they ended up heading in the same direction. When you talk about having access to healthcare where it's needed, look, we're becoming a little bit of a mecca for youth sports there in the center of Sussex County. We have sports at the beach where you have hundreds of kids that are playing baseball, softball during the summer. Sand Hill Fields, where we're going to have, hundreds of kids that are playing soccer and lacrosse, with the closest hospital emergency room being 20, 25, 30 minutes, depending on traffic away. Denying something like that, and adding to that, Georgetown is not the wealthiest area in Sussex County either. So if you're talking about providing services where they're needed in the communities where they are needed, it doesn't. The actions of this board don't reflect on what we've heard is the mission and the purpose of the board. I've got a big problem with that. I've got a huge problem with that. I have a big issue with our healthcare systems being told, well, no, we think we know better than you. Telling that to BB, telling that to Bay Health, telling that to anybody that comes in, and any of our health systems that come in and say, we see a community need because we are in the community, and the Health Resources Board coming back and say, no, we know better than you. We're going to deny your application. They have boards of directors who are in the community. They make these decisions not very lightly at all. They think about that. They analyze that from a business case, from their health systems. They're not going to throw something somewhere and invest tens of millions of dollars in a location where it's not going to work well for that health system and for the people that they serve. I'm not sure where these decisions come from. But I will tell you that it is not reflective of what the best care is for a lot of these communities especially when you're denying that in an area that absolutely positively needs these services. You know, one of my concerns is if we take away the Health Resources Board and open it up to competition, that you're going to have some of the big for-profit players come in and squeeze out our nonprofits. That is a concern of mine. But at the same time, I think that the HRB has fallen flat on its purpose, and that is to make sure that we have that care, those facilities available to our communities that absolutely positively need it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Senator. I did see that Dr. Fan, who's from the Healthcare Commission, had raised her hand. And Ms. Fan, if you had something to add to this conversation, I'd welcome you to share with the committee.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Chairperson, for recognizing that. I am the chair of the Healthcare Commission, and I just want to add a couple of comments to what Senator Pettyjohn has just said. I really appreciate his comments, and I actually appreciate the amount of work that has been done for this review. The recommendations have a lot of great content to them. And having said that, if we're talking about recommendation 1, which I understand is the first point of order, is the reason to continue the HRB, maybe not in its current form, is based on, I think, the recommendations under 2 and 3. I think there is a need. I think the HRB, while has a purpose, I personally agree with Senator Pettyjohn that it has not been optimally exercised and implemented. And so being more cognizant of that and deliberate in that process is probably one of the purposes for these recommendations, but that does not necessarily mean you need to throw out the baby with the bathwater. So I think that looking at what our state's healthcare delivery system is currently at and the deficiencies that we have to move away from any sort of advisory or regulatory purpose as we look at how we improve the healthcare delivery system is not necessarily the optimal step right now. So I think that as the Joint Sunset Commission looks at whether they want to continue or terminate the HRB, I think looking at the purpose of it and how it could be optimized would be useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fan. And while you're here, because of your work and the work the Healthcare Commission does overseeing the HRB, I would be curious to know if there's something that you haven't seen on our recommendations that you feel, if continued, would improve.
I actually thought it was a very comprehensive report, to tell you the truth. Obviously, I think that a lot of the recommendations would be very useful in improving the process. And so I think that this is a very meaningful review and process that is always needed for any sort of these committees, to tell you the truth. So I think that from our standpoint, the DHCC has been very helpful to us.
No, I appreciate that. And I'm sure you know from our perspective, really, at the past meeting, some of the shock that some of our committee members quite openly shared about how I will use the term dysfunctional at points this has been. But can you give me? I know everyone's talking about why continuing would still be good for healthcare delivery, right? I'm not a doctor. I'm not a public policy analyst. I'm sorry, I'm not a public health analyst. Can you name, your top reasons why this board should continue to function, although albeit in a different form?
So I think when we look at what the original purpose was, to look at how to align need with actual current access and future access is probably where I still believe there is a purpose and need for HRB. I feel that the current iteration of it is not meeting 21st century healthcare delivery needs, but that doesn't mean that 21st healthcare century means no oversight, no review, no monitoring, because I'm not so sure that within our state market forces will actually be able to improve on that purpose, be able to align access with need. And I also agree that we have seen, for example, in the Philadelphia market, when you have multiple for-profit organizations come in and take over healthcare facilities, it has been to the detriment of their patients. They end up closing them, they end up taking away that access, they end up really not serving both the patient population or the staff that actually are in their healthcare systems, because it is a quote unquote for-profit organization. Now, luckily for us in Delaware, I agree with Senator Pettyjohn, all our healthcare systems are currently nonprofit. But if we don't have something such as a certificate of need or health resources board, at least review advisory committee, then you can have the potential for those for-profit organizations to come in and build a freestanding facility, saying that they're meeting a need, and then when it doesn't make any profit, taking it away, which in the end hasn't served anybody's need. And it really has driven both the cost and has not met any kind of healthcare deficiencies, at least in the Philadelphia market. And I'm only using it as an example. Obviously, we don't have the same patient population. Obviously, we don't necessarily have the same health outcomes. But I just want to point out that when we don't have that kind of process, that can be a very slippery slope about what happens in the future. So I think incremental. And the healthcare commission has always tried to be kind of incremental and deliberative, and therefore that if we look at how can we use the current infrastructure to improve what we're looking at, that's why one of the purposes of the HRB really to optimize that would probably be the next step.
Thank you. And just last question, I assume that should the committee go with option 2, at a recommendation 1, that the healthcare commission would be involved with the restructuring and the statutory revisions, providing your commentary. Is that right?
We would hope to be. I think that would be whatever draft legislation comes up about who that other oversight committee is.
Okay, thank you. I want to move to Representative Dorsey Walker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would like to say a special thank you to Dr. Fan for her service, specifically to my district at St. Francis. She is greatly appreciated. The questions that I have are actually based off the conversation with Senator Pettyjohn. And he did mention and recall to my mind that Bay Health and BB were both denied expansion opportunities. Can anyone speak to why those decisions were made, especially in those areas of our state where healthcare is actually needed?
You can go ahead. Mr. Fallon, would you like to answer?
Sure, I'll do my best to answer that. Thank you, Representative. And I will say that I unfortunately had to recuse myself from both of those denials. And so I only know secondhand and what the board published. I will say that my understanding of both of them was a concern. And this is the issue with both of those were emergency room applications. And the concern was that emergency rooms tend to be used or may be used from time to time for non-emergency uses. And so that, and I don't have the figures in front of me, but a cost, an emergency room visit will cost in multiples of for example, an urgent care center. And so the concern was that with the accessibility of the emergency rooms and inaccessibility of other lower cost care centers, that the emergency rooms would be used for purposes for which they were not intended. And I will say that, and I think this is an important point, Bay Health did withdraw their application, and they included a hybrid model in their subsequent application, and that application was approved. And so we did approve Bay Health emergency room. My understanding is that BB is also going to make a similar proposal. And I certainly wouldn't want to make any predictions until that proposal is fully vetted, but I suspect that they have seen what happened with Bay Health, and I suspect that they have made corrections or additions to their proposal, and I suspect that they will be trying to address the concerns that the board had. But I do think it is important to understand that there was a basis to do that. One of the applications has now been approved, and the second application is in process. But your messages are loud and clear and understood.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. And thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick follow-up, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I sincerely appreciate your candor on that answer, Mr. Fallon. And if we could look at the possibility of the lack of equity and fairness when we're making these decisions as we go forward, that would be greatly appreciated, because again, to Senator Pettyjohn's point, I have great access to healthcare in my district, but I would like for my colleagues to have that same kind of access in their areas in Sussex and in Kent. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And just on that last point, I'm not sure if Amanda, I don't know if you're raising your hand for this reason or not, but there is the HMR that we're working on. Is that a place where we could, as a committee, have an influence on the factors that are under consideration?
Hi, thank you. So the HRMP is the document that pretty much guides this process. The document does have the 7 pieces of criteria that the board reviews applications, and that is pulled straight from the statute. So while this committee doesn't really have purview over top of the HRMP, that's something that falls on the board and the board staff, and certainly with the Healthcare Commission overseeing that falls into that basket. But the statutory criteria for review, that's under review considerations, under recommendation 3. You have procedures for review, which I covered in one of the slides, and then the review considerations, that's where you find the 7 pieces of review criteria that each application the board is sitting and making sure that it meets. I did want to point out that in the past 7 years, as presented last week in the presentation, the board out of 30 applications only denied, I believe it was 2, and 1 was withdrawn. I do want to make a statement on the first part of that question with the Bay Health and BB applications. Mr. Fallon was clarified that Bay Health had withdrew, but I want to highlight that the reason for denial of the BB application in August of 2019, it was denied because the board cited that emergency services were available in the proposed areas. The proposal was not in alignment with Delaware's initiative to lower healthcare costs. That's in line with the discussion where care at emergency room is more costly and more expensive and would put more cost and more burden on the healthcare system. So that's what it's talking about with that. And that less costly alternatives were available, and the proposal would negatively impact the existing healthcare system. So that was the reasons for denial. Bay Health did withdraw their application. They came back with the application of the hybrid model. And as I pointed out in the presentation last week and this report, this hybrid model has never existed on the East Coast, let alone in Delaware. It was not researched. I cannot find any questions where the board or the review committee were asking questions on this hybrid model. The hybrid model was founded in Texas, which is a non-CON state. It only operates in the Southwest region. And except for Nevada, that whole Southwest region is not CON law states. Nevada has very limited capacity in that they only take CON applications for rural healthcare facilities costing more than $2 million. And there was Indiana, and that's a CON state, but they only review nursing homes that are transferring beds from another county. So that was the issues that were presented with those applications in the full report that is on the website and that I reviewed last week. The most important point is that the board, there was no evidence that could be found that they questioned the hybrid emergency department model in any depth. However, when the first application for BB was being reviewed, they did have epidemiologist, Dr. Shavak, and I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but she had given the board, or the review committee rather, some information at a March 28th, 2019 meeting about freestanding emergency room departments. But then when the hybrid model came, she didn't appear to present anything on a hybrid model. So that was the facts and everything that was discussed in this report and that I reviewed last week. So hopefully that clears up any questions dealing with that. It is outlined very clearly here in staff finding 7. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. And I know I'm just going to pop over to Senator Pettyjohn, who had a question about one of the comments you made in your response.
I'll let you finish drinking first, Amanda. Now, so I just want to clarify, and I want to make it very clear for anybody who's listening right now. Although BB's request for an emergency room, a standalone emergency room, was denied, the hybrid model, which does include an emergency room, was approved, and I will say, just by knowing the geography, that hybrid emergency room / everything else that it's got is actually closer to 2 other hospitals than the one I guess it would be just on the northwest side of Georgetown was.
If I may, I did forget to mention one of the most important parts of that approval of the Bay Health application. The review committee, the 3-member review committee that I spoke about last week, that review committee voted to deny the Bay Health application for pretty much the same reasons that the BB application was denied by the review committee and the full board the year before. So the review committee, out of a vote of 2-1, actually voted to deny that Bay Health hybrid model because of the same reasons, that it was costly, didn't fit in with the healthcare plan, and there were alternative, less costly modes of treatment available in that area. So it was denied. What is interesting is when it came before the full board overturned that denial from the review committee, voted to approve it. I believe there was a couple recusals, there was a couple members that had voted against it, but the majority approved it. And it was approved with, as I noted, with little to no discussion. There was not much discussion that one would expect listening to a meeting where you were a board voting against what your review committee had voted to deny. You're voting to approve. You would expect that a lot of dialogue and discussion and robust discussion would occur, and that was absent. And that was another thing that was pointed out in staff finding 7. So I neglected to state that, but that is an important thing to state because the review committee did deny this application for the very same reasons that the BB was denied by the full board and review committee the year prior.
And Amanda, if I may just follow up on that, can you point to, obviously that's concerning, can you point to where, though, in your recommendations or where in the recommendations there's a potential to work on issues like that and safeguard?
Absolutely. So the first, the recommendation 2 to restructure this to advisory capacity would be one safeguard. You would have the board with its institutional knowledge to review applications, to take in all that public comment, And I think it's also important to mention that the full advisory board would be sitting there for that meeting, whereas in the current structure, they have it split off into a 3-person review panel that sits there for the public comment and a public hearing if that occurs. In this case, a public hearing did occur. Your full board isn't sitting there listening to all that public commentary, which, you know, as an analyst, that's problematic because as you as a committee member, you know, even with this review, some of the committee members were here in person last year for this presentation with the public comment. There was only 2 public commenters, but still, you know, I think you get something from hearing that firsthand. So that restructure to advisory capacity really puts the research mechanism in place. It allows the staff, specific staff, to do the research and vetting of these applications, not just taking whatever the applicant is presenting. It creates a mechanism for robust discussion. And then with all of that information, with the research and then the advisory decision, you then have the director of the agency, wherever that may be, make that final determination. And you make that final determination based on all of that information presented, not just, you know, information presented from the applicant, which, you know, as we kind of went through last week, that can be problematic because the board was set up to, just like in every state that has CON, you have boards set up to look at these applications, as Mr. Fallon was explaining. It looks at it through 7 pieces of criteria that looks to see if it matches and fits in with the healthcare system, if it's going to cause damage to it, because, you know, the focus is to improve the healthcare for the entire state and all Delawareans, not to harm it. So that's one of the criteria that's looked at. So that piece would help a lot. And in recommendation 3, the statutory revisions, those would also be of great help to restructure because you're restructuring the board composition. Last week, I recommended maybe looking at a number of 5 to 7 members on an advisory. You know, 15 probably wouldn't be needed. That would help with the quorum requirements. And then certainly just, you know, discuss today the activities subject to review. I think that really needs closer look. And if these recommendations were adopted, that is something that your staff would be discussing with HRB, the Healthcare Commission, DHSS, any stakeholders involved. And as you know, when we have draft bills and the committee approves it, it enters the very public process of, you know, the legislative process of, you know, how the bill becomes a law, you know, Schoolhouse Rock. But, you know, those activities subject to review, I think, is a key. Also, the procedures for review, the review considerations. I think all of this together in 2 and 3 is going to help improve how this board functions and what its intent is for the state.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I'm going to move to Representative Spiegelman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things I'm hearing that I just want to clarify for members of the committee who aren't in my world, in the real life, outside of sitting in this chair on Zoom with y'all, I am a commercial realtor. And I have to tell you that one of the things I'm hearing from this process is almost a fear that if we sunsetted the HRB, that there would not be any sort of review process if somebody wanted to put in a new hospital, a new urgent care center, et cetera, et cetera. As it turns out, there's still licensing requirements through the Department of Health that they still have to pass. You still have to have the proper zoning at the location itself, and you still have to get either municipal or county approval or both, which have all sorts of size requirements and parking lot requirements and all sorts of things like that that are already in place for any sort of property, especially something as complex and as expensive as, for instance, a hospital or an urgent care center. So to Senator Pettijohn's point, if you have something that's approved by either the city of Georgetown or the or Sussex County Council, and that DHSS is saying we want and can be licensed, and you have federal licensing guidelines for all of these things, but then the HRB, which doesn't have an economist on it, comes in and says, no, we can't really do that, or we can't get a quorum together to do it. This absolutely throws a huge wrench in this system that would as a commercial realtor, somebody who's trying to put these people in would drive me absolutely up a wall. And my next call would be to my representative or senator and saying, like, why is this in place for this specific industry, but no other industries tend to have to go through something like this, not even childcare. So I think that's something that we should consider as we're looking at whether or not, you know, that this recommendation number 1 and recommendation number 2 is that if we go with recommendation number 1, it's not like all of a sudden we're opening up the floodgates and hospitals and urgent care and doctors' facilities can go in wherever they want. It just doesn't work like that in a commercial realty world. There's still all sorts of safeguards to protect our constituents, our communities. But also, I don't like the idea of the HRB being able to tell Georgetown or Sussex County or Kent County or Smyrna or Wilmington, everybody wants this but us, so go away.
I see Amanda has her hand raised.
Yeah. Thank you, Representative Spiegelman. I really appreciate you making those points because, yes, that is how the process works. I do just want to note that when you are looking at opening a healthcare facility, there is an office called the Office of Health Facilities Licensing and Certification. So that is the process to go through to get licensed. So while something may not fall under the purview of a CON application or CPR process with the HRB board, they do have to go through health facilities licensing and certification. Like just real quick off the top of my head, for example, a doctor's office does not need to go through the CPR process, but they do need to go through the Office of Health Facilities Licensing and Certification. The other important thing to note is that if you are opening like something such as a freestanding emergency room department, you do have to go through the CPR process first before you go through the Office of Health Facilities Licensing and Certification. So everything that Representative Spiegelman mentioned with the zoning and everything, yes, that's going to come first. That's part of the planning because that's actually part of the application process with CPR is showing your plans, your blueprints, you know, your project viability, if the entity can, you know, sustain the cost of building whatever they're proposing. So that's part of the HRB application process. So if they receive approval, then they move on to the Office of Health Facilities Licensing and Certification. So in recommendation 3, really taking a closer look at the activities subject to review, I think is really important here if the committee votes to continue HRB and hopefully also restructure it, consider restructuring to advisory capacity. But yes, absolutely looking at the activities subject to review because Representative Spiegelman has valid points here that there is a lot that goes into opening a healthcare facility. And, you know, to that end, that's probably why you see national trends when states look at revamping their CON laws, that they are, you know, really diminishing what they are approving because they're finding that there's so much already in place that kind of controls what's going to get built and what's not. And I think also notably, the entire list of everything that has been received and approved. And I can pull it up on the screen. Mark, if you jump down just a couple slides, we can put that on the screen for everybody. Keep going. One more, sorry. One more. It's further down than I thought. That one. So this, no, back one.
Now you went too far.
No, he went too far. Sorry, but this is the list, just so everyone can see it and have it in front of you. I know the words might be a little small, but you can see here that this is everything that the board reviewed over the past 7 years. It's color coded. So 2014 starts on the bottom right-hand side, goes up all the way through 2020. So you can see everything's approved here. Bold print is denied. You had something for a freestanding surgical center with First State Orthopedics that was denied in 2015. And the Bay Health, of course, or the BB, of course, the hot topic of today, the freestanding emergency department that was denied in 2019. Everything else was approved here. And you can see where things are falling in. Like you had a couple applications for freestanding emergency departments. You had the cardiac cath lab that was mentioned by Representative Griffiths last week. You have a lot of build outs, a lot of bed build outs. There's skilled nursing bed expansions. So that's the majority of what you're looking at. A lot of renovation and consolidation plans here. an oncology center. These are things that when I talk about looking at making statutory revisions under activities for review, this is what I'm talking about. Look at all these applications, they're being approved. Is it really needed to go through the entire process when you already have a licensing process at the end of it through the Office of Licensing? Is it needed to go through the CPR process? So that's what we're talking about, and that's what would be discussed when going through the whole drafting of the bill process.
Madam Chair, may I follow up with that, please?
Please do, Representative.
Thank you. Yes, Amanda, you're absolutely right. In other words, here we have, if they're just approving these things, then essentially what we're looking at is time and money. This is time and money spent to go through an approval process in order to get an approval process to go through an approval process of another approval process. That's essentially what we're looking at right here. And that has got to be maddening. So my first thought when looking at this is not just, okay, well, look at all the time and money you spent on getting the approval process, but if this is going to be the case, because I hear this from my commercial clients, how many organizations, doctors' offices, research facilities did not bother to come to Delaware because this was in place and they just didn't feel like dealing with it? Why would I spend the money to go through this process in order to go through another process when that money I can spend in another state that doesn't have something quite like this on the facility or my people or the employment or the land itself instead? This is, we talk about being Delaware having a competitive edge against our other states. We are small, we are nimble. This is the opposite of small and nimble.
Amanda, I see your hands raised. And
yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that yes, all of those points are valid, and that is definitely the reason for the recommendations that are before you, is to have a mechanism to keep the process, but really restructure it to something that makes sense and works. And I can't say it enough, the activities subject to review is extremely important in recommendation 3 as part of that process, because the list that you just saw on your screen, it's a lot of that. You can look at that. Is it really needed? Is it really needed to have an entire CPR process for a PET scanner? Case in point, in 2015, because St. Francis was leasing it, the board determined it wasn't needed. But yet, when other situations, the DuPont Hospital for Children, they wanted to purchase one in 2016, they had to go through the entire process. So that's
Amanda,
a little more information.
Amanda, can I ask a clarifying question? I want to make sure I'm on the same page as the analyst recommendation. My understanding of the analyst recommendation is to severely limit the activities subject to review. That's correct? That's your interpretation as well?
I would suggest that, yes. I think that if recommendation 3 is adopted, then the job of your staff would be to work with the partners involved, DHSS, the Healthcare Commission. I think all of that input is important to really go through this list of what they currently review for activities and really trim it down, trim out the waste, as Representative Spiegelman was speaking to. Those are valid points. This process is very time consuming, and Representative Griffiths, provided some, an anecdotal situation with the Children's Hospital and trying to get the cardiac cath lab. And the surgeon have to take time off work and then go to a meeting only to find it was canceled. So that's just some, just quick little examples of what has happened in the process. And what I'm suggesting is that you can revamp the process, you can make it functioning to fit the criteria of what it was set up to do. And in doing that, the activities subject for review absolutely need to be reviewed, and the statute needs to be overhauled.
I do want to make sure that we are able to get to a motion as we're approaching the last quarter of our meeting time set aside, but I want to make sure that Senator Pinckney and Representative Dorsey Walker get a chance to comment first. So if we could have those 2 comments and then talk about a motion moving forward. Senator Pinckney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had 2 questions. They kind of been answered along the way, but I think I kind of still want to ask them straight out. The first one was to a comment that Representative Dorsey Walker made earlier about equity, particularly in Sussex County. I was wondering if someone from the HRB could speak to us specifically about what their equity conversations actually look like. Do these things get taken into consideration when we're looking, or like it was mentioned that the applications were denied because the services were there, but then we were turning around and saying that that's also continues to be an issue. So is equity something that is seriously considered? Is access to care in a healthcare desert seriously considered, or are we specifically looking at just cost? When I came into this meeting this morning, I was pretty sure I knew where I was going with my thought processes. This conversation has now put some question marks in my head. So I'm very curious about what equity conversations actually sound like with the HRB. So that's one question, and then I'll pause there. And if I could ask my second question, which should be brief.
Mr. Fallon, did you want to answer that question directly?
Sure, I'll try to do my best. Absolutely, Senator. One of the things, the key factors we look at is the need of the population, or need of the population for the proposed project. So certainly, if there is a particular need in a particular area, that's one of the key factors we're going to be looking at. If there's one part of the state that certainly has a fulfilled need, and another part of the state that doesn't have a fulfilled need, that's something that is one of the key factors that we do look at. Yeah, certainly, we do look at the availability of less costly, more effective alternatives to the proposal, but the need of the population is one of the keys. And we also, there is a health resources management plan, which is part of what we go by. And that has the issues that you raised as well.
So can you speak to then one of the things that we talk about a lot in healthcare is continuity of care, right? So can you speak to what that process looks like then in your conversations? Amanda just told us that there were several contradictory decisions made by the board. So can you speak to us about what your continuity of care looks like then? How do you base current decisions that are made from the work of other decisions that have also been made in the past? I'm thinking about how Amanda said that applications were denied for several of the same reasons or several of the same needs, yet we didn't do anything different in the next decision making. So can you speak to how you reflect back on decisions that you've already made when it comes time to make future decisions? Hope that makes sense.
Sure, I'll do my best. Obviously, we try to be as consistent as possible. And I think in the instance that staff was speaking about, in particular the Bay Health issue, as at least as I understood it, I don't want to speak for the rest of the board. As I understood, the reason we changed essentially the result on that was because Bay Health had addressed some of the issues that had been raised by the committee previously. I can't sit here and tell you how long that meeting was. I can tell you that the members of the board, we're all volunteers. Obviously, we don't get paid for this. We're doing it as a public service. And I thought that meeting went on fairly long. I thought it was a robust discussion, but you know, that's the sort of thing that we try to do the best with. We have counsel that helps us. All our deliberations are conducted in public, and we do our best to be consistent. But, you know, obviously things change. The population in Sussex is growing. I think that that probably had something to do with it as well. Sometimes if you don't make a correct decision before, I think it's important to adapt. And I think that in this instance, I don't know that our decision was inconsistent, but certainly I think we adapted. And I think that constantly looking at things that are different and how things are changing, you might come up with a different solution, a different response.
Thank you. And then, Madam Chair, if I could, just my other question is actually probably for our staff.
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Fallon. And go ahead, Senator Bigney.
Amanda and whoever else feels comfortable answering. This was kind of addressed by, I believe, Representative Spiegelman's question and conversation, but can you tell us a little bit more about what states that just eliminated this process or don't have it at all, what things look like for them and what that might look like for Delaware if it were sunsetted? Because we're having a lot of conversation about that. We've actually got a ridiculous amount of community outreach about their desire to see termination. So could you just humor me and tell us what that might look like for Delaware outside of anything that was already just said by Representative Spiegelman?
Sure, absolutely. First, I just wanted to quickly follow up with one of your earlier questions about the review criteria. I happen to have it in front of me, and just for the benefit of you, Senator Pinckney, and some of our other committee members who weren't on the committee last year for the public presentation, because this part was in there. It's also in the reports. But anyway, the 7 pieces of statutory criteria that's mandated by HRB to decide these applications, what they're based on, the decisions. Number 1 is the relationship of the proposal to the HRMP. And as I said earlier, that HRMP, a lot of that is pulled from the statute, and that it's information that is focused on, the healthcare policy and desires of the state, what it means to be a good healthcare facility that's contributing to the overall good of the system. Number 2 is the need of the population of the proposed project. 3 is the availability of less costly or more effective alternatives to the proposal, including alternatives involving the use of resources located outside of the state. So number 3 looks at the alternatives that are inside the state, but also in close proximity to outside the state. 4 is the relationship of the proposal to the existing healthcare delivery system in the state. And that is also involved a lot in the HRMP document. 5 is the immediate and long-term viability of the proposal in terms of the applicant's access to financial management and other necessary resources. That's looking at, the financial capacity of the applicant. 6 is the anticipated effect on the proposal on the costs of and charges for healthcare. And 7 is the anticipated effect of the proposal on the quality of healthcare. So that's the 7 statutory pieces that these applications are weighted on. And in recommendation 3, that is another thing that deserves having a look at. I can tell you, looking at from other states across the country that have CON processes, it's not that far off. Like, it has similarities with what I see in other states. It could use a look at. It hasn't been, to my knowledge, it hasn't been changed or modified in at least a decade. It might be longer. But then to answer your actual question for me, what this looks like is that, as Representative Spiegelman stated, there's already a lot of measures in place when a person is evaluating, or a company is evaluating, to open a healthcare facility. Important to note that HRB in 2009 actually has a moratorium on new acute care hospitals. So that's something else to look at, if that is something that needs to stay, or if that's something that, shouldn't be there at all. I had, expressed last week that there was concern with that, because when you look at other states that have similar restrictions, those are actually put into law and code. And in this case, it's only in section B of that HRMP. It doesn't even appear on the website. So I'm not really sure how widely known that is in the state, that there's actually, you know, that moratorium on the new construction of acute care hospitals that exists. So that's part of the discussion as to whether or not that should be codified, whether or not that's something that HRB should even have as a restriction. A lot of states do have that. I can tell you that a lot of states do already have these moratorium laws on the construction of new acute care hospitals. A lot of them have it on new long-term care facilities, but the states that have those also have a mechanism to submit an application to the review board to reconsider, like if they present compelling evidence on why, you know, a new acute care hospital would help the overall healthcare in the state. A lot of states have mechanisms for them to submit those applications if they feel, you know, they have found an unmet need, that they could, you know, submit an application for consideration. I hope I'm answering your question, but I think that, you know, in taking a look at this and really restructuring it, really taking a look at the activities subject to review, which I've said is key here. I think that's, you know, where the importance is, and, you know, it's the terminology of it's not throwing, you know, the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, it's right, because as Dr. Fan had mentioned, like this structure does, it provides, it provides a service to the state to ensure that the healthcare is, you know, meeting the needs of its, you know, citizens. It does have purpose. It's just, we really need to look at where that purpose is going to be most helpful. Right now, they have, for the activity subject to review, they have a whole lot of healthcare facilities listed in there. So really, it's worth looking at, is that needed for all of that?
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Senator Pinckney, Representative Dorsey Walker. And I will note that we are coming up on 12 minutes left. So if everyone making comments could please try and make them as to the point as possible.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Senator Pinckney, for those questions. I have a very quick question, and I'm hoping it can be answered quickly so we can move forward. When I saw on the list that Amanda put up on the screen, and it said that First State Orthopedics was denied their application, what was the reason for the denial?
Amanda?
If you can give me 1 minute, I can look that up. Did you have any other questions? I have the information. I just have to find it real quick.
All right, while you're looking that up then, thank you, Representative. I see you shaking your head. I'll move on to Senator Hansen before we wrap up this line of commentary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding what our staff is saying, and that they believe that the HRB actually still has a purpose. It's not a decision-making purpose, but it is a purpose as an advisory body to the decision makers. So Amanda is shaking her head correct. And so I just wanted to make certain that that was indeed the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Senator Hansen. And Amanda, do you have that answer for Representative at this point?
I do. Give me 2 seconds. I am getting it. But yes, that is correct, Senator Hansen.
While you're looking for it, I just want to recognize Senator Richardson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick, Senator Pinckney, I think Pinckney asked a question I don't think was really answered. Amanda, you've done an amazing job at analyzing this material and gathering all this information. I appreciate that. But I think the question was, in other states that have dissolved this criteria for the CON and so forth, has there been, what has been the effect? Has it been an adverse effect? Has it been a positive effect? Do you know? And that's all.
Yeah, I think for some states it's probably too soon to tell. You know, Florida just did some revisions. I want to say it was a couple years ago. there were, sorry, the state escapes me right now, but there was a state that did some revisions in 2019. So a lot of states are freshly looking at this information. So, that information is probably too soon to, make a comment on. But I think what's important is by leaving the structure to advisory capacity and, basically trying this out and seeing what it, looks like as advisory capacity, you're not completely sunsetting it and you're leaving it intact. So if it's found that, it wasn't a great idea to, if the activities subject to review were really limited, as I had suggested earlier, if they were really limited and it was decided or discovered, through research that wasn't a good idea, then the legislature, can go back and run a bill to increase that oversight. So I think that was another important recommendation here is, and I had mentioned that last week, is number 2 to restructure to advisory capacity really is a compromise. It's not completely sunsetting it. It's not keeping it as it is, but it's moving it to advisory to keep a mechanism there for review, but doing it in a, with more oversight and research, which the program desperately needs, in my opinion.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much, Senator. Senator Richard.
I did find it.
Okay, thank you. Do you have that answer, Amanda?
I do. I'm sorry. I didn't have it sitting here in front of me. I apologize. I probably should have. But the First State Orthopedics, the construction of a freestanding emergency, no, that wasn't an emergency department. That was a surgical center. It was proposed in Dover. The reason for denial was the application did not meet the need of the population. There was currently a surplus of freestanding surgical beds in Kent County, and there was a surplus between 8 and 10 beds in Kent County. So that's one of the things in the criteria that the board is looking at, is they're looking at, the beds and if there's a surplus or a deficit. So in this particular application, that was the board's reason for denial, is that they determined that there was currently a surplus. Now, I can't say how they determined that, just based on the research. I don't know as if they independently determined that, or if that was, I don't know what source that information came from, in other words, but that was the reason for denial.
Thank you, Amanda. All right, I believe the only person I've heard so far express interest in a motion was Representative Urich, and so I'd like to ask, sir, if you would, the floor is yours, if you still would intend to make a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just some quick points here. One, that First State Orthopedic Centers, it's now open. However, they changed the process. It's now open in Dover. They built it. Two, I mean, we're concerned about for-profit hospitals coming in, but the reality is that there's mergers and acquisitions with nonprofits, so they can still stay in existence due to the competition of qualified workforce reimbursement rates. And my third point is that, in regard to the freestanding emergency room, as I've sponsored bills in the past about being a better healthcare consumer, the numbers are, if I remember, that for someone going to an emergency room, non-emergency is $1,400 cost. If you go to an urgent care facility, it's $150 cost. If you go to your primary care internal doc, it's $20 cost back to the state. So whether it's through Medicaid and or the our self-insurance for our state employees. So there's significant resources involved. My recommendation would be, with option 1, to sunset it. I would recommend the Delaware Health Resources Board be terminated, and we sponsor legislation to implement this recommendation.
Second.
Thank you, Representative Urich. Thank you, Representative Spiegelman. All those in, or sorry, is there any other discussion? I know we've had robust discussion, but any other discussion prior to the vote? All right, all those in favor, well, I'll tell you, all those in favor signify by your silence. All those opposed, oh, I'm so sorry.
Madam Chair, for this.
We'll do a roll call.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to, is that what you were wanting to say, Senator Richardson? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Zoom has its own lovely challenges. I will, and I apologize, I don't have, I'm going to go by who I see on the screen. And so I'll just do a roll call if Amanda, if you could track our votes for us. So Senator Hansen,
No.
Representative Spiegelman,
Yes.
Senator Pettyjohn,
Yes.
Representative Griffith,
No.
Representative Johnson,
No.
Senator Pinckney,
No.
Representative Urich,
Yes.
Representative Dorsey Walker,
Yes.
and who did I miss? Oh, Senator Richardson.
No.
And I am the chair, Kyle Evans Gay, voting no. Amanda,
Yes, thank you. So I have I have 6 no's and 4 yeses.
okay. Having not received 7 votes, the motion is denied. Senator Richardson, your hand is raised.
It shouldn't be. All right,
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you,
Sorry.
sir. No, no problem. All right, is there, could we put the recommendations back on the screen, please, Mark? Is there anyone else who'd like to make a motion at this time? Senator Pettyjohn?
Yeah, Madam Chair, just real quick. Although this motion failed, I kind of want this to be a stark reminder to the HRB that we're going to be watching. We had 4 members of the Sunset Committee that said that based on what they've been doing, that they should be discontinued. I just want to, put that on the record, make sure that it's a good reminder for the HRB that there's a lot of disappointment in what they've been doing as this vote shows and as the comments have also shown. So I just want to make that, and we can go ahead and move on. Thank you.
No, thank you, Senator Pettyjohn, and I do not speak for everyone who voted no on the motion, but personally, I would note that I do believe there are folks who voted the motion down who agree that severe oversight and change is warranted, but that change is better than termination. And so I think the same applies, and I would hope that the HRB understands that the robust discussion here is only the beginning of a process where we hopefully will help them make their processes better. Senator Pinckney.
Madam Chair, I agree with your entire response to Senator Pettyjohn and with Senator Pettyjohn's remarks. I think that many of us do take this serious and really want to see significant changes and improvements from the HRB. And with that being said, I'd like to make a motion to adopt recommendation 2 to restructure.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Senator Pinckney. Thank you, Representative Griffith. And I'm going to restate it, Senator Pinckney, because of your volume, just so everyone who can hear that the motion, I believe, was to adopt recommendation number 1, option 2. And I had a second by Representative Griffith. I'll go ahead and do a roll call on this vote as well. Amanda, if you could track the votes for us again. And I'm sorry, Amanda,
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, that's okay, Senator Gay. I just wanted to clarify because recommendation 1, option 1 to continue it.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Respectfully, I think if you're voting on recommendation 2 to go to advisory, either include recommendation 1, option 1, or do it separately. Holly could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you have to vote on recommendation 1 to continue before you move to the next one.
Thank you so much. I
Okay.
misspoke. Recommendation 1, option 1. I apologize. And so we're going to go ahead and take recommendation 1, option 1 by itself, and then we'll see what we can do to move. We'll see as per Senator Pinckney, unless Senator Pinckney would like to amend her her motion at this time. You're good. All right. So we're going to do it's a motion for recommendation 1, option 1. We'll do a roll call as well. Again, for all those watching, we're enjoying Zoom as much as you are. And so if I could Amanda, if you could track the votes, I'll go again as what is viewed on my screen. Senator Hansen,
Yes.
yes. Senator Richardson,
Yes.
yes. Representative Spiegelman,
No.
no. Senator Pettyjohn,
No.
no. Representative Griffith,
Yes.
yes. Representative Johnson,
Yes.
yes. Senator Pinckney,
Yes.
yes. Representative Urich,
No.
no. Representative Dorsey Walker,
No.
no. And I am the chair, Kyle Evans Gay, voting yes.
Senator, I only count 6 yeses and 4 nos.
All right, thank you. That motion also did not receive the required votes. We are at the end of our allotted meeting time. I would ask that, I think that obviously considering the state of affairs today, with the committee unable to vote to terminate or to sunset or to continue the HRB, that it's clear that additional conversation is needed in order to come together with 7 members to find a path forward. I would motion to table these recommendations to be brought back for a separate agenda item at a future sunset meeting. And I'm happy to the second from Senator Pettyjohn. Is there any conversation or comments about that?
Just
Yes, Representative Urich.
sorry about that. Just a quick comment. I appreciate all the input and dialogue with all my colleagues. I think it's a fine example of, I mean, this is a big issue. It's a serious issue. Look at healthcare, whether you look at the national perspective of what 1/6 or 1/7 of the economy here in the state of Delaware. It's what we spend is 30 to 40% of our. But this is, I think, a good example of what this committee should be doing. And it's professional, it's civil, and we should take our time. This is a complicated issue that I think it's bringing out the very best in this committee, the public, in the process. So I'd just like to put that on to this comment.
I appreciate that, Representative Urich. I appreciate you and your comments and discussion today. And thank you to every one of the committee members for, as Representative Urich said, keeping this a civil and engaged and professional conversation. We are all here to do the better work for the people of Delaware. I note that Representative Spiegelman has comment as well. You're on mute, sir. Representative Spiegelman, you're on mute.
I've never made more sense than when I'm on mute. I want to propose a third option to this recommendation number 1 that's got us at a standstill, maybe a bit of a compromise, and that is some sort of sunset provision within the HRB. Perhaps, and I just want Amanda and Mark to perhaps give us a third recommendation here in this option number 1, or a third option is recommendation number 1, excuse me, that would allow them to continue as an advisory board with a sunset provision that is several years out. That way it would allow the General Assembly to make the decision of whether or not the organization is doing as it's supposed to do, and then removing that sunset provision. And if it's not, it would allow for a sunset provision, it would allow the organization itself to sunset without perhaps having to appear before us again.
Thank you.
That would be an adequate compromise. I'd be willing to vote for it.
All right, and I think though that since we are at the end of our meeting time, I would, and there's a motion on the table as far as tabling, I don't think that those two, that recommendation is in conflict with addressing that potential recommendation on a different day.
Let me clarify, Madam Chair. I'd like Mark and Amanda to put that in as an option under recommendation number 1 for our next meeting.
No, I appreciate that. And please, let's try not to talk over each other. So Amanda and Mark, you've heard Representative Spiegelman's comments and requests. I know your hand was raised before then. I hope you can fulfill his request, because I believe that a lot of the committee would be interested in finding a path forward, obviously. But did you have any other comments before we move on to a vote?
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, I was just going to say that it is after 11. So yeah, that absolutely can be worked into a recommendation number 1 to sunset. The sunset or this committee statute does have those provisions in there where if you vote to, you know, severe, or if you vote to really change something, you have a mechanism to look at it in a future date. So I can definitely put that in. I don't know when you would like to put that on an agenda. I know coming up on April 1st, we have the nursing home. So I don't know if you would like to add it to that, or you could just let me know, I guess.
No, I appreciate that. We'll discuss that, I think, offline and see what we think that the committee can handle. And so thank you to Representative Spiegelman for that helpful direction. And I think that'll be a good way to start the conversation should we address this. Again, I'm happy, members of the committee, to continue to have this conversation, but being mindful of folks' time and mindful of the robust discussion I think any recommendation would need. I would, again, state that there is a motion on the table, a motion to table these until a future meeting. That's been seconded by Senator Pettyjohn. Seeing no hands raised, I'd like all in favor of that motion to signify by your silence. All those opposed, please unmute and say nay. Any abstentions? All right, hearing no opposition, this committee will address additional recommendations from the committee and the HRB at a future meeting. We will make sure that the public has plenty of notice about that meeting, and we'll make sure that the committee members have plenty of notice of any revisions to recommendations prior as well. There's no draft legislation for us to review today, and so this concludes our meeting agenda. What I will say for the members of the committee, many of us who are new to this committee, you will see draft legislation that was previously approved by this committee being assigned to first the Senate Sunset Committee, and then if it makes its way through the Senate to the House Sunset Committee, these chamber committees still need to meet to release the legislation, even though this committee has approved the legislation to be introduced. So I look forward to working with my Senate colleagues as we hopefully next week look at some of the legislation that has recently been released. Our next meeting is going to be on Thursday, April 1st at 9 a.m. We're going to discuss recommendations relating to the Delaware Nursing Home Residents Quality Assurance Commission. And they're going to be sent, those draft recommendations for the committee members should be in your inboxes tomorrow. I will just say before I adjourn, there was a question from a committee member as to the count from the last vote. And Amanda, I believe it was 6 in favor, 4 opposing the motion. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
That is correct.
I appreciate that. If there's no other questions or comments, then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.